Good afternoon. Welcome to session 4 of European Entrepreneurship and Innovation in the Stanford School of Engineering. Today is February 1. My name is Burton Lee. Today we're focusing on European market entry for Silicon Valley startups with two outstanding speakers from local valley companies, American companies who are in the process of moving to Europe. Our speakers today are Darian Shimi, Vice President of Engineering from Weebly up in San Francisco, and Gabriel Hubert, who is with the New Markets team at Stripe, both up in the city. Also would like to remind people who aren't following Europe terribly closely, this week is European Startup Week, Startup Europe Week, all week, February 1 through February 6, February 5. There are events all over Europe in major European cities showcasing startups from the local ecosystems. I invite you to visit their website. There's a lot going on right now this week, celebrating, promoting, publicizing many of Europe's top startups in all the major European cities in every country in Europe. So Gabriel has been very kind to come down from San Francisco, as has Darian. He is in the New Markets group at Stripe, also a graduate of Stanford Engineering, Management Science and Engineering, I believe. That's what correct. Year? 2009. 2009, so a recent graduate. Thank you for coming down. Tell us what's going on at Stripe in European market entry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'd just like to start with a quick show of hands of those who are engineers in some capacity, software developers who'd feel right. Those who know Stripe as a company, feel comfortable they could describe what Stripe does. And those who've actually tried looking at the documentation or the guide to integrate with Stripe. More modest show of hands. All right. Great. That means that the introduction to Stripe is probably something that is useful. So my name is Gabriel. I joined Stripe a year ago. I joined the New Markets team. The New Markets team is specifically tasked with deciding which countries we want to expand in and then actually making that happen. And it's a team that's based in San Francisco, with some of us actually spending most of their time abroad. Before joining Stripe, I started and ran my own company that was headquartered in London and had a team based in Paris. And so I've been at Stripe a year. It feels a little longer. Part of that is to do with the fact that at Stripe we're quite busy and a lot is happening. But the other reason is that my company was actually the first company to use Stripe outside of North America. And we'll get back to that. But we were very fortunate to be able to join the private beta of Stripe at the time. I think it will be important to give an overview of Stripe, what we do and how we think about our expansion, because that will tie into the way we look at European market entry in particular. And so I'll spend some time looking at that. After that, I could have come up with a number of frameworks, but I thought that this list of questions might cover some aspects that are interesting to look at when considering global expansion, and in particular, expansion into the European market. Stripe is the payments infrastructure of the internet. We were started in 2009. That's when the first lines of code date back to. We were officially launched in the US in 2011. And we're mostly represented by a set of APIs and tools that make it easy for developers to accept payments online. I insisted on each and every word in that sentence because we really do believe that they're all important. Obviously, the core of our activity is payments, but it's online payments. We really focus on the activity of paying not at a point of sale, but either on your desktop, on a tablet, or on mobile. Our key audience is developers. We really believe that the developers of today are building the products that will be powering the most interesting and high-growth companies of tomorrow. And so it's important for us to provide them with the best set of tools. And the word infrastructure does have its importance because it really is the idea that you can rely on Stripe to build the rest of your product, to forget about the payment side and focus on the actual business that you're trying to grow. Just to give you an idea of the complexity that we're trying to take away from our users. Now, the financial industry refers to them as merchant or sellers. They're our users, so that's what we call them, users. This is a diagram of some of the entities that you would have had to deal with directly or indirectly if you were trying to accept payments 10 or 15 years ago. Some of those words are particularly difficult to comprehend and not necessarily transparent. I won't detail them all, but the idea is that there were a certain number of steps before you could start to accept payments online. And we've been talking about steps that were very manual, tedious, involved paperwork, and would take weeks to complete. Stripe takes all that complexity away and makes it possible for you as a user to interact with Stripe and Stripe alone to handle payments. That's really how simple we want to make it. We've been rather successful over the past years in gaining traction among these online businesses in a variety of segments. There's a classical e-commerce segment, build a website to sell a product online. There are some more interesting or novel business models around software, especially subscriptions. DigitalOcean is an example of one of our users that makes it really easy for developers to fire up a certain number of QA instances in an instant. And more interestingly, marketplaces, business models that actually didn't really exist a decade ago, are also turning to Stripe to power the experience of a buyer and a seller coming together on a platform that is then going to take a cut of that transaction. And we're very happy to be powering Lyft in that respect. If you're not particularly familiar with the Stripe experience, the layout doesn't quite come out as I'd expected, but there should be a checkout in the middle of this screen, which is actually one of the ways you might, as users, interact with Stripe. We are a business-to-business company, but end customers are presented with a Stripe checkout when our users decide to use a checkout, which is really just a couple of lines of code that allow you to enable payments on desktop, mobile, or tablet quite seamlessly. There we are. There it is. So, on to global expansion. We're currently present in 23 countries around the world in varying capacities. We distinguish between a fully launched country, where we believe that we have feature parity with the leading product offerings, and betas, where we're still trying to learn how to better serve our users. Of the 23 countries that we're currently present in, 7 are outside of Europe, and then, so that leaves us with 16 that are actually in Europe. We're present in the US, Canada, Mexico, and Brazil. And then on the other side of the map, Australia, Japan, and the dot in the middle is Singapore. Singapore, where we recently launched a private beta. In Europe, 16 countries, 6 fully launched, and 10 in beta. So I'm going to dig into the questions that I mentioned earlier on, the why, the when, the what, and I want you to keep in mind that I'm taking the point of view of a Stripe. Not all companies are business to business. Not all companies are developer focused, nor are they all global by nature of the product they offer. And most importantly, not all of them are infrastructure companies. That does put a bar on the availability, the robustness of our product that we have to reach wherever we make ourselves available. So please keep that in mind and take everything that I say with the appropriate lens hereafter. So, Stripe in Europe. We've been in Europe in some capacity for over 3 years and counting. The initial work with our financial partners started in 2012. The first invite to a private beta of Stripe in the United Kingdom was on March 1st, 2013. And I remember because Dieter, who was then head of international at Stripe, sent me this particular email on a Friday afternoon. And instead of going for beers, we came back in and actually launched payments on that very day from the office. We're currently in 16 countries, as I mentioned, 6 where we're fully launched. That's the UK, Ireland, and the Nordics, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. And then the rest where we're in beta, either private or public, depending on whether we accept people to sign up freely or whether we actually invite users that we want to have come in. Why? Why should you go to Europe? I think I'll mention 2 very important aspects of this that all tie into the mission that your company has. Stripe is an infrastructure company that wants to make it possible to accept payments from wherever in the world for companies based wherever in the world. And so Europe was never an if question, but more a when question, because we knew that we would want to make it possible for businesses in every single company in the world to accept payments. We really do think that in the years to come, new categories of businesses are going to emerge, and that the barrier to create your own company, to start accepting payments online and to grow that business are going to be reduced. So we want to be present wherever in the world the people who are building those products decide to set up shop. As we thought about why in Europe, the obvious first statistics come to mind with the attractiveness of the market. More than 500 million inhabitants, more than 75% of whom have access to the internet, a $400 billion B2C e-commerce market compared to the US and Canada market of $425 billion, so roughly the same size market. And those are all very interesting figures because they give us the number of buyers and the health of the buying market. But what we were also very interested to see from the very beginning is what the seller's side would look like, what the actual businesses that are there look like. And so the numbers that we look at are the number of websites that offer payments as part of their experience, but also digging a level deeper, the number of GitHub accounts, the health of the Stack Overflow community, the angel list presence that we have in those countries. Those are all indicators of the market that is maturing for the actual seller side, the people building the products that we think can see very high growth in the future. So Europe for Stripe was an attractive market in of itself, and it tied into our mission to be a global company, and that's something that you should always keep in mind. It wasn't just reaching Europe as a sort of tick the box, and it's not just because of the current opportunity that we thought Europe was very interesting, but also because of the future opportunity that is emerging out of Europe with developers present there. So if the question of why has been handled, then the question of when pops up. Should we do it now? Should we do it later? In Stripe's case, we started looking at expanding into Europe pretty much the day after we launched in the US. In 2012, we were mostly focusing on building the financial partnerships that would be required for us to set the rails up for local businesses to accept payments there. And we staged our launches over time. I think the important point here is to consider Europe as a group of very different and very, very interesting countries with their specificities, cultural differences, as well as local technical differences. For a payments infrastructure company, that means not just translating, but also providing a relevant payment experience in the countries that we're in. So I mentioned that a group of countries that we are currently fully launched in is the Nordics. The reason to launch the Nordics together in June of 2015, for example, was because we saw a high level of interconnectedness between those economies and a product market fit that we deemed sufficient to call it a full launch at the time. And the UK and Ireland, we also had the language, but the payment landscape also fit with Stripe's offering at the time. In the other countries that we're not currently fully launched in, we're still learning. And we believe in the value of waiting and building that local market expertise in order to offer a product that is going to be able to compete there. So I think I put as a catch, you don't need to launch Europe in one day, but you do need to be learning. And every single launch, whether it's in private beta, in public beta, or in full launch, we bring all the information that we take from that launch back to prepare for the next one, to shorten the time from the decision to go into a market to the actual day we can say to users, hey, you can accept payments in this country. And that's something that is just as important as considering when to start off the launch process in Europe. What do you launch with? What is the product that you're actually going to launch with? I think Darian very clearly mentioned the fact that once you go into a particular market, there are going to be different demands. For Stripe, being present and being able to serve our users means offering a solution that has some or all of the features that Stripe currently offers. Our API is, of course, one of the products that we're best known for, but Checkout is also a product that we are very proud of that allows the integration with a very limited number of lines of code for people to accept payments across all devices. Connect and Relay are two other products that we launched to match the business models of the businesses that we see as potentially the most successful online in the years to come. Marketplaces, and also enabling the sale of items across apps, across social networks, such as Twitter, for example. And in that process, we realized that some of the product localization had been done, but we'd artificially correlated the importance of that localization to the rollout in a particular country. And what I want to get to is the fact that Checkout, because it's visible to end consumers, is important to have translated regardless of the number of countries you're actually present in. You may be powering payments for a US company that itself is actually catering to a French audience. And it's important for that French audience to see a checkout that is available in French. And that's why Checkout was translated into 5 additional European languages last year, ahead of the full launch into France or Germany, for example. So where to launch? The question of, where do you put the boots on the ground first? We started in London. That's where Dida set up shop in 2013. That's where the first team was built. And in chronological order, that's where we first launched in Europe. But we also very quickly set up fully fledged offices across Europe, in Berlin, in Paris, and in Dublin. And the reason for that was that although the timeline to a full launch may not have been immediate, we believed in the value of having an office there to hire very, very capable local talent and learn from within the market as opposed to from within a distance during our build-up towards full launch. And I think if the companies that you're envisioning can afford that at that particular point in time, being in the market, again, to Darren's point, has an incredible edge over looking at it from the outside. Even though you may think that one office in Europe is better than not having an office at all, having that local expertise, being able to talk to users with their very specific needs at a country level. The resolution for us is a country, not a city. We really see that the country borders as being the most relevant is key. The last point that is also important here is the fact that as you are expanding, support in the headquarters is going to become key. The new markets team was specifically designed to build on the expertise of the first launches, relay that expertise within the company, and also serve as a hub from which to plan and execute the launches of the following countries. The leads are in Paris, Berlin, or the UK are very busy with their own work, and they won't be able to launch the other European countries. We will be helping them to execute on that plan. I think it's important to dissociate the local work that is going to be done for the local markets as they grow from the actual overall effort to switch countries on as you go.
And Gabriel, how large is your new markets team here?
The new markets team is just under 10 people.
Under 10 people?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to give you an idea of scale, we currently have just under 50 people scattered across the offices that we have in Europe. Who do you hire? Who do you start with? It's obvious that the different phases of growth of a country are going to require different profiles for the entities. What has proven very helpful and efficient for us is to hire extremely autonomous generalists even before we start a private beta. The particular focus of Stripe as a product means that we have to hire people who are very comfortable in the developer community, taking input from that community, being able to filter the feedback that we get from those countries and separate the signal from the noise. I got this piece of feedback, but I don't actually think that we should pay attention to it. Or, hang on, this is a very weak signal, but it may be key in making the product more relevant in that particular country. And that feedback loop has been extremely valuable for us over the years. Now, as the country moves from private beta to a more public beta and then ultimately focuses on local growth, the profiles you're hiring will change. But what you must keep in mind is that the first hires in those countries are just as important as the first employees you hire in your startup. The amount of trust that you're going to put in these people is without comparison. They're going to be alone. They're going to be 9 time zones away from you if you're based in San Francisco, and they're going to be making decisions every single day of the week that shape the way the company will progress over time. So the amount of effort and the bar that must be put on those first hires is, I think, very important, something that we're happy with.
So that brings in, you also need to modify your onboarding processes to make sure those new hires in Europe, if they're on their own, understand the culture and how you work back at headquarters. Right?
Absolutely. And that's actually a great tie to my very last point. At Stripe, we've from the beginning decided that we would want to operate as a global company and invested to make that promise come true. And that comes in various shapes. So the trips that these people take from their offices to San Francisco very regularly, at least once or twice a quarter, the rotations that we encourage anybody at the company at Stripe in San Francisco to do 2 or 3 weeks at a time in the offices in Europe, and Convergence, a week-long yearly event that brings the entire company together in San Francisco, regardless of whether people are in support, development, business operations, or sales. Everybody works together from San Francisco to operate as one, at least once a year. And so I think that the key takeaway there was the importance of the first hires and the profile that they would have, the impact that they would have on your local performance. So I think, as you pointed out, Aaron, it depends. There's no one single strategy to tackle localization. There's definitely no one single strategy to tackle European market entry. But the important points to remember are that although Europe is a self-standing, interesting market, it needs to be tied to a commitment, a mission-level commitment to make Europe work, so as to take the short-term tactical arbitrages with the right long-term state of mind. When you decide to do it is entirely dependent on the state of the company, the state of the funding, the competitive landscape, but you can stage Europe. You don't need to go to Europe in one go. What product do you bring? It's important to be very thoughtful about the staging of your product and understand which parts of your product you thought you could wait for until global expansion hit, but actually might have been relevant before that. That was the example of checkout for us. And where to hire? We decided to go for London first, but we also made the conscious decision to have fully fledged offices across Europe and not just outposts that people would hot desk from. Lastly, who to hire? The key focus in the very first hires is, I think, primordial.
And so does that mean that for each country you're developing separate but interconnected product roadmaps?
So the product roadmap at a high level for Stripe is unique. The rollout of those products by geography may be tiered.
I mean the timing of the rollout?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. For some products, the timing is actually very simple for us. Our documentation is in English. We have no short-term plans to translate or localize documentation because developers, by and large, are very used to reading English documentation. That's one example of the products where rolling out in another country is not blocked by the translation or localization thereof. Just finished off with photos of our Dublin and London teams in the new floors that we've picked up in Dublin and London, respectively. And yeah, that's it from me. So with that, I'll be happily taking any questions.
Thank you. So I'm sure our IDA Ireland representative is very happy to see Dublin up on the screen. Yes, so questions for Gabriel. Yes, at the back, please.
Was there a market where there was already an incumbent, and how did you handle that? Did you empower the local team to make local decisions?
Yeah. So the question was there a market where you had a local incumbent? How did you handle that? And was the local team empowered to make local decisions? Yeah, we didn't invent online payments, and so there were local offerings. There were what we'd learned from our experience in the US and the product that we developed had actually allowed us to build a substantial amount of expertise in the approach we took to the problem. So although there were local incumbents in accepting online payments, their approach to instant boarding, their approach to allowing you to process live transactions within 10 minutes of having signed up for an account wasn't something that we saw as very prevalent in the market. Also, the network effect for Stripe is that by signing up to Stripe, you get the power of all the other countries that we already power processing in. So without going into too much detail, if you sign up to a solution that is in France, bound by the French borders, and makes it really easy for you to accept payments when set up in France, that's not quite the same promise as saying, well, you're actually getting the value of local processing in all the countries that we're present in, not just the country that we're offering the service in. And I think the last point was also that our product offering at any point in time was slightly different, maybe slightly more attuned to the new business model that we were seeing emerge. So the local teams haven't necessarily had to tailor to a local incumbent response too much, because Stripe's overall strategy and the way it's decided to approach payments, and probably approach them slightly differently from the way they'd been done before, was actually also a fit in the different markets that we were rolling out in.
Let me just add an editorial point here. So you said you have approximately 50 people in Europe right now representing Stripe, and you've been there for 3-4 years.
Yes.
Okay.
3 years.
You're just entering the European, and how many people do you have in Europe now?
3.
Okay. So we have some very high-level European policymakers here in the audience. The point here is that Silicon Valley companies are actually creating many new jobs in Europe. That's a very important point, because often the dialogue in Europe at a policy level is about Silicon Valley taking jobs away from Europe rather than creating them, brain drain. That is not the case. We are creating new jobs in Europe. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, could you tell me a little bit more about the regulatory issues that you're into, especially being a fintech company?
Yeah. Is there a more precise question there? The regulatory issues is a very, very vague one.
Especially, because it is a fintech company.
it's different than US dollars, it's like that euro. So were there many big differences, or was that a hurdle, I guess is the question?
So there is a regulatory context to the activities that Stripe conducts. And I think the short line is that we are appropriately regulated to conduct the activities in the different regions that we have to go to. That does mean acquiring a certain regulatory status that is not the same and that does not automatically make itself available when you move into Europe. But it's something that we put the appropriate level of effort into early on. I think it's maybe the difference between a B2C company that, I'll take an extreme example that isn't Weebly, like a photo sharing app that is just looking to expand into a new market, isn't quite the same as a sort of 12-month-long financial partnership, business development roadmap with all the legal implications there. And so it is something that sort of kicks off the moment we decide to go into a particular country.
Is that how long it took, 12 months?
It's actually a process that can take longer. But the order of magnitude is the year, not the month or the week, definitely.
Yes. This gentleman, you had a question?
My question is related to the question we had before. In terms of incumbents, my question is rather, you've probably heard of Rocket Internet in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
They have a business model where they copy other business models. So does this influence, did it influence your decision to expand faster than it used to be before?
The short answer is no.
Because your business model is more complex and you have more benefits and cannot be copied quite fast?
I think, it's software, so being copied is always a question of time, not necessarily a question of capacity. But we felt the need to go into Europe independently of the presence of, you might be alluding to Paymill, which is a Rocket Internet-funded payments company.
Yes. Oh, and then we'll come to you.
So what's your process of like adapting your product to a different country? Like, of course you do research initially, but there must be a reason for the teams to be there. Like, how do you look at the customers you're working with, or like how else do you do it basically?
Yeah. So for Stripe, going into a new country means making a compelling payment solution available to local businesses. So one of the core aspects of that is actually looking at the payments landscape. How do people pay online? One of the reasons it was easier to launch in the UK than it has been to launch in a country like Germany is the fact that in the UK, by and large, a vast majority of online commerce happens with credit cards, which is very much the case in the US. In Germany, the percentage of commerce that happens with credit cards is roughly 20%. And Germans use other solutions to pay online, bank transfers, invoices, and that complexity has to be built into the product roadmap in order to address the needs of the German market. We actually do that research for two reasons. We do it because we want German local businesses to find Stripe compelling, but we also do it because some of our large American users are looking to us to power their expansion into the European markets. And so when they turn to us, they say, all right, which countries can you make my solution available in? And at that point, we also have to be relevant there. So I think that's maybe the major difference with just translating a website or localizing a website. The actual product offering will change from country to country.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my point was on a continuation of that. Is what actual changes to functionality did you have to make when looking at different markets, and how did you advertise differently to different groups with different priorities?
So two questions. I'll probably try to answer them sequentially. The changes that you do have to make go all through the life cycle of the interaction that you'll have with your user, from the very first page that a user sees and the actual information that you'll ask them to fill in. There are some countries where you fill in a personal tax ID number. In the US, people are more used to the social security number. So those slight subtleties actually have their impact on the conversion that you'll have with developers signing up to Stripe. Once you're signed up to Stripe and able to process, that ability is to process on major credit card networks. So in some countries, we're also thinking of the ability to add other payment methods. The US referred to them as alternative payment methods. They actually represent almost half the payments outside of the US. So it's like more fairer to call them non-card payment methods. But so building in that complexity. And then in all the interactions that your users are going to have with the different Stripe properties, whether it's the API error messages, the languages that they will be shown in, depending on whether they are user-facing or end customer-facing error messages, the dashboard, the checkout that we talked about. So all those will be taken into account as we bring the product to a given country. And then, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your second question. how did we advertise it? So largely, Stripe is really happy to mostly benefit from word of mouth at this stage, and the demand for our product sort of precedes our entry into that particular market. Our most powerful form of advertising has been to date stripe.com/global, where people can sign up and we let them know when the product is available in their country. Again, tying back to the focus that we have on a relatively tightly knit community of developers. If you're a developer and you don't know about Hacker News, maybe you're not the kind of developer that we would most keenly go to in the first instance of joining a new country. And then as we grow the country and as our growth efforts mature, we'll be building up different advertising or outbound strategies. But initially, we have demand in the markets that we go to.
Yes, sir.
Sure. How much pressure do you get from investors to expand into new markets? And I guess, two, how helpful are they? I'm not sure if American Express is one of your investors. How helpful are they in terms of coming into these new markets and disrupting, even though they are at the same time incumbents? And how does that relationship play out?
I don't sit in the board meetings, so directly from my investors, I have very little pressure. And rather than pressure, I think the key word there is interest. We have investors who joined Stripe because the promise was to solve one of the last outstanding problems at scale on the internet, payments. So it's, again, the interest of when and how we're going to go about solving payments for everybody in the world to accept payments from everywhere else in the world. But I don't know that pressure is the word that is most descriptive of the relationship between our board and our investors. And then we do have some key investors that are also players in the financial space. It's not necessarily easy or possible for me to comment on the entire scope of our activities with them, but needless to say that they turned to Stripe for a certain number of reasons. They didn't know about Stripe a few years ago and are now very keen on knowing what we want to do with the capabilities at hand. So the conversation is interesting.
And we had one question, yes, and then we're going to bring Darian up for joint Q&A.
Yes. You. Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Do you have further expansion plans in Europe, to eastern part of Europe, or?
So we communicate on the countries that we're in, and not on the countries that we go into, and so that's unfortunately the. But we want to be a global company.
So, Pavel, do you have any particular interest in any specific country in Eastern?
My email is on the slide, so
Yes.
wish lists are welcome. But
Russia, of course.
Yes.
So follow-up question, how do you evaluate whether your entrance into a specific market was successful, and what are the main performance indicators?
Yeah. I think that the current indicators are more the reaction of the local community, and specifically if we feel that we're building a product that people want to use. Rather than any other metric, or specifically financial metric. I think early on, for a country that is less than 2 years old, or that is in its early stages of growth, it's making sure that we build the product that will essentially make people want to use us. And that is the core metric, or at least point of discussion when we look at the health of a private or a public beta.
Darian, let's bring you up, and I'm going to ask you to, for the sake of Dave, our camera guy. So we have two companies entering Europe who are at very different stages of growth. Talking briefly about some of the similarities and differences, when you go into countries from a design point of view, are both of you basically doing A/B testing, tweaking a user interface design country by country? How do you go about actually through that process of making sure French or German or Italian consumers have a similar but probably not quite identical experience and user interface to work through?
Yeah, so we're very consumer facing. So we pretty much A/B test virtually everything we do. Every homepage, landing pages, even new features, they all go through the same A/B test treatment. When we show our homepage and landing pages in France, for example, we want to have an imagery that is representative of that country. So when people see that, it feels much closer to what they're used to seeing. But it's up to the country manager to decide the direction, how long to run the test, how many tests they want to run, what frequency, and everything like that.
And are they supported by a general design team back here, or do you bring in local designers?
We have a general template that we use. So far, we have an incredible design team in San Francisco and New York that we use. They're all employees of Weebly, but we are just starting in Europe, and we have full plans to start hiring designers, engineers, people for PR and marketing activities out there as well.
Okay. Gabriel, any thoughts?
Being a B2B company, the sort of pressure on A/B testing of all our properties is likely less important. We A/B test checkout very extensively and make sure that we maximize conversion for our users, because that's the promise. With regards to our design team is currently based in San Francisco. The good news is more than half of them are actually European, so if we were looking for cultural proximity there, we have it.
And are you French?
I'm French, yeah.
French, okay. From where in
Oh,
France?
Eastern France, Nancy.
Okay, Nancy, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions? Let's see. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Are there countries you went into and had to pull back out? Did you expound on the reasons?
I'm sorry, can you speak up, please?
Are there any countries that you went into where you had to pull back out of? And would you expound on reasons on why? Or were there countries where you studied it and decided it didn't make any sense to go into? And how did the company balance that against basically global ambitions?
So at our stage at Weebly, that has not happened. But I will say, like in prior companies, it's usually we don't pull out unless there's some regulatory hurdle that we can't get over. Usually it's kind of, we just put it out to pasture. So we just stop making investments in those countries. We don't do paid or display ads. We don't do any more marketing or PR in those countries. The updates are very, very less, and it kind of just goes off so that the current users who are still on there can remain on there. You never know what may change later on. There may be opportunities in the market that change that let you come back in. But by and large, I mean, with Weebly, it's still too early, and we haven't backed out of anything. We're in fact going deeper in many other areas.
We've not backed out of any of the countries we've gone into. Part of the goal of my team is to prioritize the countries that we want to go into next. And so it would be counterproductive for us to set ourselves up to a challenge that we then didn't feel like facing. So we've not met that problem yet.
Both of you are hiring.
We are.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Both here and in Europe.
Both here
Yes.
and in Europe.
Okay. Are you looking for Stanford students?
Of course.
Who isn't?
Interns or full-time jobs, or both?
Both.
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 Okay, for this coming summer. So
Yeah.
Stanford, engineering, business, humanities. I mean, you're looking for autonomous generalists?
Well, the new markets
in-
team and
new
the first
markets.
people on the ground.
Right.
Every team at Stripe is hiring, and so
Okay.
autonomous specialists are very welcome to.
Okay. And your hiring for Europe is done through here or each local office in Europe?
The recruiting team is both in San Francisco and in Europe. But if you have a great CV, regardless of the end it comes in through, it will make its way through the organization at the speed of light.
Okay. We'd like to thank both of you for coming down from the city.